Hello, hello, welcome all to Amir Shakur Speak Show with your host Amir Shakur. That'll be me. And having a little technical difficulties this evening. How are you guys doing? And yeah, we're gonna get through it. We're gonna get through it. If I didn't know any better, I would say that the 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 people up in Washington D.C. may not be wanting me to do this show, but hey, I'm just a little guy, so who knows? You know what I mean? Anything's possible in this day and age. So I want to welcome you guys to Amir Shakur Speaks again with your host Amir King Seven Shakur. That's me, and we're opening up about a controversial topic which has been circulating around the news cycle for probably the better part of it's been going on for a decade, but more intensively, obviously, as a lot of you guys know, for the better part of a decade. So we're going to drill it down as best that we can within a short amount of time that we got together, and we're going. I think we'll make some sense of it. A lot of people don't really understand they don't understand what's going on with this Epstein case and why it even matters and why it's so controversial. So we're definitely interested in really letting people know how this is working and where it's coming from and where it's illuminating. So let's go ahead and get into it if you don't mind. So again, I'd like to welcome you to Amir Shakur Speaks, which brings the best of urban information, faith, and politics, all done from an inspirational perspective. If you have not done so, if you are on the World Wide Web, please go ahead and like and subscribe. Tonight's show is sponsored by the Chicago Urban Daily. I'd like to send a huge shout out to my peeps all in the Thornton Township Citizens Action Committee, the South Side of Chicago, and even our New York team. So remember, your voice matters, so let's stand up and speak out. Today we're talking about the Jeffrey Epstein case and why it is so controversial. And I think we could do some justice with it. I am. I want to start off by just bringing what it is to the stage and just talking a little bit about it. So the background here is Jeffrey Epstein was an American financier. Many of us in the news who've watched the news cycle lately know him as a child sex offender, serial rapist, and human trafficker. He began his professional career not as any of that, but as a teacher, being hired without a degree by the Dalton Corporation, gentleman by the name of Donald Barr. And he was dismissed from that school in the mid 70s, or excuse me, mid to late 70s, like 1976 to be exact. And that's when he entered banking as a financier, working with Bear Stearns in various roles before starting his own firm. A progression which I think is kind of unusual, especially for that time. So you go from entry level employee to a financier as with your own firm. Well, it's kind of questionable to me. So I mean, I think the premise here is questionable from the gate. Epstein cultivated an elite circle, made much of his fortune by providing tax and estate services to billionaires. So he procured a lot of accounts, I would say, by working with billionaires. That's in the daytime, but in the nighttime, dig this. In the nighttime, he procured underage teenage girls and young women who allegedly were subjected to more of a call girl situation and repeated rape, and some of the claims or some of the allegations have been really heinous, listing like a who's who. So let's talk about this person. I think when we start talking about an Epstein case, you really got to talk about his partner, Ghislaine Maxwell, because I think that, or Ghislaine, or I believe it's Ghislaine. I'm going to go with Ghislaine Maxwell. She was a convicted associate of Epstein and refused to answer questions from the U.S. Oversight Committee as early as even today, because I think she's waiting on she's waiting on a pardon from Donald Trump, and I think that they pretty much guaranteed her that. I mean, the allegations are rampant. But Maxwell appeared virtually for a closed door deposition from the Texas prison where she was serving, where she is serving, I should say, a 20-year sentence. The Republican House Oversight Committee Chairman James Conrad said that, as expected, she's pleading the fifth, invoking her right to remain silent. And I guess they're disappointed about it, but not sure if they're actually disappointed about it, or are they are they happy about it? I think that Miss Maxwell has a lot of the goods on a lot of people, and she could damage a lot of careers and in and outside of Washington, D.C. So the controversy comes in, and this is what I kind of wanted to share with you, and then we'll go to a news cycle. The controversy comes in when we think about this particular person. So this is her father, and her father is or was, I should say, Robert Maxwell. And Robert, if we were to break this down, for years there had been allegations that Robert was attached to he escaped the Nazi occupation of Czechoslovakia and joined the Czech army in during World War II. He was decorated for service in the British Army, which again is a progression which is really strange. In subsequent years, he became a publisher. He owned a press, and a major academic press. As a matter of fact, in 6 years, he became a member of the Labour Member of Parliament, MP. That was during the 60s, right? So, for those who don't know, the Labour Union is one of the biggest political organizations in the UK. So Maxwell, again, put all of his energy in the business and became a member of that. So let's talk a little bit about that. And what I'm going to do is, while I'm pulling up the video, I just wanted to show you a little bit about him. So give me 1 second. Excuse me. So here's where we're at, and so Robert is a very questionable character, everyone. And the reason why I say he's a questionable character is because he's definitely someone who, again, with some of the ties and some of the allegations, I think that really we have to start with Robert Maxwell. And Robert's thing, if I could say more or less, is, the background of it coming from extreme poverty, and he built a massive public empire, and the early military and political career, which, gave rise to media. A lot of people, I'm going to cut to the chase. A lot of people say that Robert, there's a lot of espionage allegations. Maxwell was frequently linked to intelligence agencies, including the KGB, Mossad, and M16. That's the British version of the CIA. And after his death, it was revealed that he siphoned over 440 million. Some say about $1.5 million from employee pension funds from his financial organization and his financial structures, which were fraudulent. So, a very interesting person, and I think that this is where our whole key to this controversy is. So I'd like to welcome you guys again. If you're joining us for the first time, we're gonna break all this down. If you're on the World Wide Web, I'd like to invite you into the chat room just to give your opinion and really talk about this topic. And I think it's very controversial, but we want to explain why this topic is controversial. So if you're joining us for the first time, again, you can find us at Amir Shakur Speaks broadcast channel on YouTube. And if you want to come in, and if you want to have some questions, you have some comments, you have some things to say, feel free. I'm going to allow the public to come in, and I really want you guys to share your share your commentary. But before we do that and we go to public commentary, again, if you're on YouTube, just go ahead and like the stream. Tonight we're talking about the controversy behind the Jeffrey Epstein origin and what's it all about. So I'm going to go to while we're waiting, I do want to go to a video that kind of breaks down and summarizes the Epstein case. And then we'll come back. If you guys want to, again, if you guys want to join us, please feel free to. While I share the screen, once I come back, then you can join me. But what we want to do is we want to go back to this origin story. And this starts off with Ghislaine or Miss Maxwell. And let's talk a little bit about that. Let's look at that and just see what it's all about. Okay, so give me 1 second and then we'll bring that video up and we'll definitely add it to the stage. So let's go ahead and add that. And I want you guys to kind of pay attention because this is a very important part of what's going on with this Epstein case. So give me 1 second and we'll pull it up.
Well, Ghislaine Maxwell certainly has critical information that would help us understand exactly, what happened and who was there at varying times. Some of that we've been able to piece together through the information from other witnesses, et cetera. But she was definitely at the center of this. The problem is she will never tell the truth. So we saw that during the deposition that we took in my case several years ago, where she lied repeatedly time after time again. We saw that in her most recent interview with Todd Blanche with the government. She lied repeatedly, provably false things she was stating during that interview. So the problem with the attention to her and giving her a voice is that there is no truth in what she says, and that's really what's missing here. Well, I think that it's been frustrating to see the government giving her an audience. We saw the interaction with her with Todd Blanche several months ago, where she was asked what I would view.
I'm gonna go back and I'm just stopping the video real quick so we can add it back to the stage. But the person that we're talking about in question right now is Ghislaine Maxwell. And I definitely want people to really understand, because I think out of the Jeffrey Epstein case, I think she's a lot more critical to what's going on than a lot of people think. She's definitely a critical element here. So let's go ahead and finish the video. The young lady is actually talking in reference to this is Epstein survivors, one of the attorneys, I should say. And she's talking during an actual deposition as far as Ghislaine Maxwell. And I guess her name is Ghislaine, the correct pronunciation, but anyway.
And I think that there's always going to be lingering questions. This is the longest running sex trafficking operation in U.S. history. So I think that the questions are going to linger for a long time as to, how did this go on for so long? How were so many very important, prestigious people involved in this? And how did they allow, how was there no adult in the room to say this is wrong? This shouldn't be happening. I think those are questions that are going to be out there for quite some time. I don't know that for the survivors, there ever will be an end. I think that they've gotten some justice along the way. They've gotten some monetary, financial justice, not perfect, but some, and they've gotten, the legislation passed. There's been certain things along the way to sort of lift them up. But I think for their journey, I don't know that it will ever, come to a conclusion.
So I just wanted to show some of the pictures. This is some of the pictures of some of the survivors, and let me go ahead and stop sharing that. So Ghislaine Maxwell is how you pronounce her name. Her father was Robert Maxwell, and I'm just showing the picture of Robert. So Robert again, he died mysteriously on November 5th, 1991, after falling overboard from a luxury yacht. So again, this is a mysterious death, right, y'all? And the lady Ghislaine off of the Canary Islands in the Caribbean was the official cause of death. It was ruled a heart attack, right? So, so my thing is that Robert to me is the quintessential CIA. Sounds like the CIA operative or a quintessential spy. I mean, there's many allegations of Robert being a CIA and a double agent spy, and he was the father of Ghislaine Maxwell, who was the partner of Jeffrey Epstein. So Maxwell himself again died on November 5th, 1991, after falling overboard from a luxury yacht in very mysterious circumstances. So, off of the Canary Islands. What were the allegations and accusations against Robert and his sons after his death? Well, immediately after his death, they said that he was doing money laundering and deceit. He was accused of using the acquisition of the New York Daily News to launder money, and was criticized by a bankruptcy judge for deceit and unchecked self-interest, stock and hedge fund fraud. To whereas they said he looted about 400 companies to hide his vast stolen fortune, and a lot of conspiracy allegations to defraud. They there's even talk of Robert being involved in the Iran Contra deal, which for me is directly involves the Iran Contra and the Israeli army, and how some of the military weaponry from the United States was being shoveled to fight the Iran Contra war, which the Israeli military was largely involved in. And so some of the allegations here are, besides the theft of securities, there's a lot of espionage type allegations, and I think that this is the whole key to the Maxwell case. All right, so everyone, if you're just joining, I want you guys to talk a little bit about. Feel free to come on board, and if you're on the World Wide Web, come on to the YouTube page, and feel free to talk about the case and your questions about it. We'll go ahead and do our best to break this rather complex story down, and how it basically comes down to Jeffrey Epstein. But I believe that if you think about the case, I think that the Maxwells are really critical in who they are. So Gilbert Barnes says, what about the revelation of salacious Veritral that he and his fellow bottom feeders, aka the elite white hat for black women? Don't know a lot about that piece, but I do know that, with a lot of the young girls, young ladies, young children, I should say, who were accused of being molested during this Jeffrey Epstein portion of it. I do know that it seemed to have come down to, just young children, young girls, and elites, from politicians to whoever, Bill Gates. With the allegations of Bill Gates, allegations of Bill Clinton, allegations of a lot of entertainment figures. Robert Maxwell, again, for me, guys, is critical in this. This is Ghislaine Maxwell's father. And the thing about Robert Maxwell is he was accused of having ties to multiple intelligence agencies, including the KGB and MI16, which is the British equivalent of the CIA. So shortly before Maxwell's death, a former employee of the Israeli's military intelligence directorate approached a number of news organizations in Britain and the UK with allegations that Maxwell, then he was the foreign editor of the Daily Mirror, which was, I guess, a short-run national news outlet, where he was accused of being an agent for the Israeli army, So, and subsequently, he was kidnapping and smuggling arms to Israel. So, and there is a legitimate here, guys. Look, there's a legitimate, um, there is a legitimate and bona fide question about, whether, these guys all were part of the Israeli intelligence apparatus. So I want to go back and I want to pull up another immediate story before we start having more technical difficulties about who it is and what it is, because I think it's very important that we can share these. We can break this thing down as far as the fallout and the origin story, and it means just so much. So let's go ahead and pull up this particular story in reference to Ghislaine Maxwell, and this is actually as of today, so it's a recent story.
Files is continuing. His longtime associate and convicted child sex trafficker Ghislaine Maxwell declined today to answer questions from a congressional committee in a closed-door deposition.
Maxwell, who was subpoenaed by the House Oversight Committee last year, said she was invoking her Fifth Amendment right to avoid self-incrimination. She appeared by video from a prison camp in Texas where she's serving a 20-year prison sentence for sex trafficking and other crimes. Maxwell's deposition comes the same day lawmakers were given access to view the unredacted files. That includes two congressmen who led the congressional push to release the Epstein documents. That's Congressman Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna.
It has exposed people in the highest levels in technology, in finance, in real estate. It has exposed the establishment and monarchies in other countries. So our push is, how do we expose this and have accountability, not how do we score political points or have retribution.
Our justice correspondent, Ali Rogan, has been tracking all of this and joins us now. So, Ali, let's start with today's developments. What did we learn?
There were a number of actions today that really were efforts to pierce through this shroud of secrecy that still remains around many of these documents. We did just hear from Congressman Massie and Khanna. They said they've seen the names of 6 men whose names were redacted in the public version that they were able to see today, who they said would likely be incriminated by their inclusion in these files. They did not name the 6 men, but Massie said one was a U.S. citizen, one is a foreign national. For the other 4, he said he could not determine what nationality they were based on their names. He did say, though, that one, presumably the one that we know is a foreign national, is pretty high up in a foreign government. This is all happening as we're learning that the FBI wrote a summary in 2025 saying that there were, quote, 4 or 5 Epstein accusers who were claiming abuse at the hands of men or women. Of course, we know that many more survivors have come forward than 4 or 5, but that there was not enough evidence to federally charge these individuals, so the cases were referred to local law enforcement. Meanwhile, as you mentioned, Ghislaine Maxwell pleaded the 5th today during her deposition before the House Oversight Committee, but her lawyer did say that she would, quote, very much like to answer questions if President Trump grants her clemency. He added, quote, both President Trump and President Clinton are innocent of any wrongdoing. Ms. Maxwell alone can explain why, and the public is entitled to that explanation. The last time President Trump was asked about this, he said he wouldn't rule in or out, granting Ghislaine Maxwell a pardon.
And separately, we know that President Clinton has agreed to appear before this committee at the request of the Republicans who lead it. Have those details been worked out?
That's right. We know so far that former President Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton are slated to sit for separate, closed-door, videotaped interviews before the depositions before the House Oversight Committee. But now Bill Clinton is saying that he does not want that deposition to be videotaped, but that he would participate in a public hearing that people can watch in real time.
So I want to stop the video right there because I think it's very important to draw a contrast to what's really going on with this and what's the reality of it. The reality of it is that for years there's been public conversations about Jeffrey Epstein, and it's flattened into a single horrifying dimension about crimes, but those sex crimes were real, brutal, and unforgivable. Women and underage girls, those crimes, the women and underage girls that were exploited, often coerced, drugged, these allegations run rapid, manipulated. They do deserve justice. They deserve dignity and lasting accountability. Nothing in this discussion should ever diminish their suffering. Young girls to the point of, barely teenagers. But to understand who Epstein really was and why his case continues to unsettle institutions across the world, we must confront a larger, more accountable truth that sex wasn't the center of his power. We believe, and the allegations are, and I do believe that these folks were CIA operatives, or excuse me, were spies. And that's what this thing is all about. And for instance, the allegations, and I have to say allegations for legal reasons, is to understand Epstein means to understand Robert, the gentleman to the left, who's Ghislaine Maxwell's father, and then to the right of the picture is Epstein and Maxwell herself, Ghislaine Maxwell. So her dad was pretty much the center of the power, and basically before he died, I mean, the trafficking, he was a global broker of influence, not merely just a wealthy predator hiding behind money, but he was the facilitator of these processes, which involved high-level espionage. It involved leverage of secrecy. It involved multiple countries and multiple organizations and Secret Service organizations. And its value to powerful people was not just rooted in pleasure alone, but I would say that Robert himself was pretty much the person who laid the track for Ghislaine and Jeffrey to continue on. And the blind spots, the institutions that were legally overlooking their proximity to the case was because decision makers who shaped the laws in the markets were heavily involved in these pursuits. I mean, Jeffrey himself rose very suspiciously from the top of running a financial organization, and really in a short amount of time. I mean, he was an entry-level employee, so how does that happen in reality? He moved easily amongst financiers, politicians, royalty, academics, scientists, intelligence links, figures, and corporate elites. So for me, if we are accessing these situations, then we're talking a little bit about these types of things. So we got to go back and we got to look at this case for what it's worth. So I'm going to go back and I'm just going to add to, let me remove this, and let's go ahead and get back to a little bit more of the PBS breakdown.
But House Oversight Committee Chair James Comer said today that this is the way that he's conducted all of the depositions in this investigation so far. And he told us today that Hillary Clinton's is scheduled for February 27th and Bill Clinton for March 11th.
And there is an international aspect to this because you have U.S. allies that are dealing with their own version of the Epstein scandal. How is this landing overseas?
Very differently. There seem to be far bigger consequences for political leaders in the UK than there are here in the United States. The fallout in the UK centers around Peter Mandelson, who was serving as the UK ambassador to the United States. He was appointed to that role by Keir Starmer. Police are now investigating Mandelson for alleged misconduct in public office tied to emails he sent Epstein in which he shared government information. Mandelson maintains he did nothing criminal, but the fallout is already centering around Prime Minister Starmer. He's facing calls to resign, including from members of his own party. Already, his chief of staff and communications director have resigned over this. And today he met with members of his own Labour Party, presumably to try to shore up some support. Also under police investigation is Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, King Charles's brother. The king said today through a spokesperson that he, quote, stands ready to support the investigation and that, Jeff, his thoughts remain with the victims.
And yet no such reckoning stateside.
Why?
That's
exactly right. And it's really, although we should note that just being mentioned in these files is not a suggestion that there was any wrongdoing,
Right.
but the split screen that is playing out between the political crisis in the UK and business as normal in the US is really striking. And that's as new details are coming out about President Trump and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick's connection to Epstein and things that they have told investigators. We now know that Lutnick had even more social interactions with Epstein than had previously been revealed. We covered that last week on this show a little bit. Now we know that Lutnick and Epstein both signed documents to invest in a private company on the same day, and they traded cordial messages for years about Manhattan real estate. Lutnick invited Epstein to a fundraiser for Hillary Clinton in 2015. A spokesperson for the Department of Congress says this is a distraction and that the two men met in 2005 and had, quote, very limited interactions with him over the next 14 years. And Jeff, on Trump himself, there are new files reported on tonight by the Miami Herald that President Trump, not then President Trump, told investigators back in 2006 that, quote, everyone knows he's been doing this, referring to Jeffrey Epstein, which of course contradicts many of the things we've heard publicly over the years from President Trump about the nature of his relationship and when it ended.
So much to track, and yet we can't lose sight of the survivors. What are they saying about
That's
all
exactly
this?
right. Yesterday evening, to coincide with Super Bowl Sunday, the anti-human trafficking nonprofit World Without Exploitation released a 40-second PSA featuring Epstein survivors.
We're standing together.
Standing together.
Because this girl deserves the truth.
Because she deserves the truth.
Because we all deserve the truth.
Jeff, this clip concludes with a QR code inviting viewers to sign a petition urging Attorney General Pam Bondi to release evidence they say exists and to provide an explanation for why millions of pages remain withheld from public view.
Ali Rogan, thank you for this reporting. We appreciate it.
You bet.
So as we speak, Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein's partner in crime, is being held at the minimum security federal prison camp in Camp Bryan in Texas, I should say, where some of the inmates train service dogs. I mean, it's just kind of like a glorified hotel. And she was saying that she would talk to Congress, but she's now pleading the fifth as of today. And I mean, if you're just joining us, we're talking about the Jeffrey Epstein case and why it matters and why it is that this has become the global controversy that it's become. A lot of folks don't really understand the dynamics, but again, I just want to bring back who these people are. So Robert Maxwell is the father to the right of Ghislaine Maxwell, who is the partner of Jeffrey Epstein. And Epstein worked for Robert, and believe many people don't really have a track. I don't have information about that, but really believe that he was trained by Robert Maxwell. And to understand who Epstein really was and why his case continues to unsettle institutions across the world, we got to confront who Robert Maxwell was. Again, Robert Maxwell had ties to the Iran-Contra dealings. He had ties to running weapons and guns to Iran, Israel, I should say. Just the Soviet Union, KGB, the M16, which is the British Secret Service. So, the British Foreign Office suspended Maxwell for being a secret agent of foreign governments, possibly a double agent or maybe even a triple agent, and said that he was thoroughly a bad character, most certainly influenced by Russia, which was their statement. So again, I'm going to say this again, a thoroughly bad character, most certainly influenced by Russia. So this is where our current president of the United States comes in. And I'm going to say for a fact that with the Russian allegations, we saw early on that these COINTELPRO operations, which were really popular during the CIA, during the early days of the FBI, to whereas a popular move would be to take these officials, and what they would do is they would, or maybe people of interest, and they would put them in sexually compromising positions to either gain information, gain intelligence, gain whatever they had, and compromise them to whereas they would be able to use them for the rest of their life or for however long they wanted to. And this has been a popular move of the Secret Service and the secret services around the world. So this is one of the reasons why many people believe that Jeffrey Epstein existed, because they were paying for influence. The allegations, and without fingerprints, without accountability, without insulation from consequences, because they deal with lawmakers and politicians and diplomats. The most disturbing question is not why Epstein abused power, but why so many institutions failed or chose not to act despite warnings, evidence, and patterns that were visible long before his arrest. Well, I'm telling you why. I'm telling you because if you go back and you do the identifiable trace to this particular gentleman, Robert Maxwell, who's the father of Ghislaine Maxwell, then you would see his longevity was not the result of one man's cunning, but it was a product of a system that protected itself. Justice, therefore, could not stop with a single villain, because Epstein did not operate in a vacuum. His influence required clients. His influence required beneficiaries, enablers, protectors, and that's what Ghislaine was. She was a enabler and a protector, because they were taught by one of the best, Robert Maxwell, who was a triple agent according to allegations and reports. His influence required clients, enablers, beneficiaries, and some active, some passive. Many of them stayed silent. And to confront not only the crimes without examining the network is, for me, is the wrong thing to do, because the network is really what it is. This is not about race. I know someone mentioned about race or politics or ideology. It's about law, ethics, and the integrity of institutions that have been compromised by an agenda. In a society that allows wealth and proximity and power to override accountability means that corruption can exist. In short, what I mean is that if these folks were good at framing legislators and framing power brokers, they basically had the goods on a lot of high-level players. Then they would. This is a world where power shields itself, where rules are selectively enforced, and where those harmed are often the least who are able to demand justice, because justice doesn't exist in the world where they're from. Understand? So in this world, you walk through the clouds because there's no one willing to look beyond the scandals and toward structure, beyond this one man's crimes, because the system, it was a systematic effort of a network of influencers that basically did not want the truth to come out, only because of who they are and what they were. Robert Maxwell, to me, is the OG of it. In subsequent years, he worked as a publisher. He worked in various members. He worked in various members of his team, and his family worked in British Parliament. And he began to gain all of his energy into businesses, buying the British Printing Corporation. So this is for me, this is the telltale sign of a Secret Service operative. And it's almost like a COINTELPRO type of operation, to where you compromise high-level influencers, you get them for what it is, and then from that point on, you're able to take them and do whatever you want to with them. So, while Maxwell led a flamboyant life, living in one of the wealthiest areas in the UK, his influence went around the world. So his death on the lady Jelaine, it was a yacht named after his daughter. She again is in the picture right here with Jeffrey Epstein. The death itself was even suspicious, and I mean, they found his body. His body was discovered floating in the Atlantic Ocean, having apparently fallen overboard from the yacht. And he was buried in Jerusalem on Mount Olivet, what was being described as a state funeral by much of the Israeli political establishment. So here's my question to you guys. Do you guys believe that this was an operation of the Israeli army? A lot of allegations are saying that the Maxwells ended up as agents of Israel, of the Israeli Secret Service, in their service ended there. And the president, the prime minister, and 6 serving and former heads of the intelligence attended Robert Maxwell's funeral, and his death triggered the collapse of all of their businesses, the publishing companies, the financial organizations. His sons briefly attempted to keep the business together, but at that point in time, Jelaine went with Jeffrey, and this is when they started a new business. And what was the new business? Well, the new business, the allegations seemed the new business was taking high-level officials and continuously compromising them to the degree to whereas, if you had the goods on these people, then you can compromise them. And that's what this thing has been about. The cover-up is unraveling as we speak, but it can never, I don't believe it will ever unravel to the degree of letting this information out, because if you let this information out, then you have high-level officials all around the world who would go down. And before that happens, Jelaine is going to be, probably she's going to lose her life, just like Jeffrey mysteriously lost his life as a VIP, and he was put in first Metropolitan Correctional Center, but then he later went to another institution and he lost his life, saying that he committed suicide, which, I don't believe that that's the case. But I want to go back to the video, and then, if you guys want to join me for the next few minutes, just want to share a little bit about there were the allegations of the Iran-Contra piece and the Epstein fall. As the Epstein fallout grows, the origin story goes back to the Iran-Contra. So let's show a little bit about that and what it is, and if we listen in, we can kind of hear it. So give me 1 second, and we'll add that to the stage, and we'll play a little bit about that. Let's listen to it.
Yeah. And his Times obit reports that his final spy thriller remains unpublished. Hashemi died in 1986 after being infected with a rare form of leukemia that was diagnosed only 2 days earlier. His death was later alleged to be foul play. After Hashemi's indictment, another player stepped in to broker access to Iran for the Americans: Saudi arms dealer Adnan Khashoggi, uncle of slain Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi. In July 1985, Hashemi, Khashoggi, and Israeli Prime Minister Shimon Peres had met secretly in Hamburg, West Germany, to hatch a plot. With CIA Director William Casey's blessing, the US would ship the weapons to Israel. Israel would sell its own weapons to Iran, and Washington would commit to replenishing Israel's stockpile later. Epstein obtained an Austrian passport with a false name and an address in Saudi Arabia at some time in the 1980s. After his arrest in 2019, US authorities discovered it in a safe in his New York mansion. At a bail request hearing, Epstein's attorneys claimed the fake passport came from a friend intended to conceal his Jewish identity in case of a potential kidnapping while traveling. 7 Americans, including a CIA officer, were kidnapped in Lebanon between 1984 and 1985. and discussions emerged around an arms for hostages trade with Iran. After Perez agreed to facilitate Khashoggi's shipments to Iran, the logistics were handled by Israeli military intelligence. Epstein's close friend and confidant, Ehud Barak, was the head of Israel's Military Intelligence Directorate from April 1983 to September 1985. He left the position 1 month after the first arms shipment was completed. To this day, Barak maintains that he was introduced to Epstein by Shimon Peres at a public event in 2003, after he left government service. Barak has also falsely claimed that he barely knew Epstein. Whether they truly met before 2003 is unknown.
So imagine this Jeffrey Epstein was dealing directly with Shimon Peres, who was the former prime minister of Israel. The level of access that this particular gentleman had, who was Jeffrey, was Jewish, is unheard of, in the level of elite access around the world. Princes, the wealthy elites, coming from Bill Gates to Bill Clinton to even folks in entertainment. It's just mind-blowing. So Jeffrey Epstein himself died. I'm gonna bring Jeffrey back to the stage. Jeffrey himself died on August 19th of 2019 at the Metropolitan Correctional Center. And for those who don't know, the Metropolitan Correctional Center, MCC, in New York City, it's the place where Puff Daddy was being held, and R. Kelly before that. So the official cause of death was suicide by hanging. They said he hung himself. So the medical examiner in the New York City's chief medical examiner, Barbara Sampson, performed the autopsy and determined that he used a bed sheet to hang himself from his bunk. And DOJ and the FBI reviews multiple organizations, including a 2023 report by the Department of Justice, and the Inspector General reaffirmed the suicide ruling, saying that there was no evidence of homicide or foul play. Evidence, the authorities cited surveillance footage showing that no one entered Epstein's tier between the time he was locked up and the discovery of his body. So, there is a lot of controversy around who this person is, what he was, what he became, and his connection to, at least around the world, and being a legitimate Israeli spy. Was he? I don't know if that will ever come out. Was Jeffrey Epstein, I'm going to ask this again, an Israeli spy or an Israeli Secret Service? I mean, did he act as a spy? What were his links to Israel? Well, documents show that there are legitimate links that Jeffrey Epstein was and did participate in espionage and with secret services around the world, but more directly Israel. And there are classified documents, which I don't know if they've been declassified, to show that. The document shows what some believe, that the disgraced American financier had links to Israeli intelligence and even militaristic and settler groups. The ties between Epstein and Israel are becoming clearer and clearer after the release of millions of documents related to the convicted sex offender, the Department of Justice. So in that whole millions and millions of documents, these documents have revealed more details of Epstein's interaction with members of the global elite, Prime Minister Shimon Peres, former of Israel. But these documents also document the funding of Israeli militarism groups, or militaristic groups, I should say, including the Friends of the Israeli Defense Forces organization, and it's a Zionistic that pretty funnels arms, kind of an Iran-Contra type situation. So we able to break this thing down. Is it bigger than just sex trafficking? Yes, it's way bigger than sex trafficking. These guys are legitimate. They're legitimate, and the allegations points to making arms trafficking, and that goes all the way to overseas intelligence services, especially between Russia, Israel, and the UK. Are there legitimate American connections that are involved? Yes. Will we ever see it come out? I'm going to say no. Why is the Jeffrey Epstein case so important? Why is it unraveling? Because of the connection to the young ladies who were used to entertain these wealthy elites. And so the young ladies who were babies, a lot of these young women were barely out of puberty. And for me, their talking really opened this case wide up, right? Kind of the same thing you saw with the R. Kelly case. You know, you started to see the parallels of a lot of these women who were abused, what it was and what it is. So I'm gonna just say that, you know, even without the level of information that was coming from officials or even intelligence reports or in government investigations, the young ladies started talking. And the young ladies are the ones who really have assisted in opening up these cases because they were legitimately sex trafficked. So that is what this whole case is revolving around, and what it is that it's being triggered down to, this is a COINTELPRO espionage type operation, which basically collapsed as the result of Jeffrey Epstein himself cultivating a circle, and the circle was procured by underage teenage girls and young women who alleged they were subjected to repeated rape by some of his associates. And who were the associates? Some of the wealthy folks, some of the elites who would frequent Epstein Island. And Epstein Island itself is an island in the Virgin Islands in the Caribbean, a small private island, which he would have child sex with a lot of these elites, and they would participate in sexual activities for the purposes of being framed. So was it a legitimate spy operation? Without a doubt that there is a lot of evidence that says that Jeffrey Epstein's case has all of the makings of a espionage operation that the American elites and American political structure, including CIA and espionage and CIA and Secret Service officials from around the world, cannot say that they didn't play a part in. And the bottom line is, when they procured underage girls and young women, basically that's what made it fall apart, because as these girls became old enough, they wanted to talk about the abuse. They wanted to let the world know what was going on. So who is the key? The key to this whole thing right now is this young lady here. This young lady is the key to it all. Ghislaine Maxwell, the convicted associate of Jeffrey Epstein. She refuses to answer questions from the Oversight Committee, only because of the level of involvement and engagement, which happened well before Jeffrey, which happened, from her father. And obviously the whole ending of this narrative is very disappointing, but we still have a lot of questions to ask about the crimes that she and Epstein committed. The crimes are legitimate crimes, and Epstein, as well as some of the other potential co-conspirators, for years, these public conversations have gone on about Jeffrey and what has been flattered into a single horrifying dimension: sex crimes. And sex crimes are real again. They're brutal and unforgivable. But I think it's deeper than that. I think it's about political espionage. I think lives were lost. The allegations of weapons trafficking are just, I mean, it's just so deep rooted and far-fetched. And nothing in this discussion should ever mention or diminish, the suffering of the young women. But definitely we have to look deeper into what Epstein was. I appreciate you guys, and I really think that, when we're talking about this Epstein case, as it stands today, it's unraveling. But to understand who Epstein really was and why his case continues to unsettle in institutions around the world is because institutions around the world have been compromised. So we must confront the bigger, more uncomfortable truth. Sex was not at the center of his power. It was a byproduct. Epstein operated as a global broker of influence, and he gained that influence by compromising some of the wealthy, some of the elites. He was a wealthy predator hiding behind money, and that's what this thing has always been about, and that's where we see. So if you guys are really wanting to look deeper into this, that's where you start at. You start at espionage operations. There's so much corruption in American business because the U.S. is greedy and will do anything for money. And the thing that I want to caution everyone who's listening is this was a global espionage operation. It just did not involve Epstein or it involved the whole Maxwell family. It involved members of former Israeli prime ministers, high-level members of the Israeli government. It involved folks in Russia, UK officials. It involved people who basically the likes of which you would never expect or never even know. But now it involves, and the reason why this case will never come to light is because they've been compromised. And they've been put into situations to whereas legal installation and proximity to the decision makers for us means that basically these people will be found out, so they're going to do whatever they can to protect their reputations. I think Epstein could have easily moved into financiers, politicians, royalty, academics, scientists, whoever he wanted to, corporate elites. He had access to all of these people. And basically penetrating power structures around the world, and the access was not accidental. Epstein cultivated an image of being indispensable, because he was an informal advisor to a lot of these people. But the informal advisor is more or less a informal or formal espionage agent, and whether formality plays a part in it or not is all questionable. Did he position himself as someone who understood how power and consequence work? Yes. Did he position himself to be a friend? Yes. But the very secrecy that has attracted these powerful figures has also bound them together. And will Epstein ever come to justice, guys? I don't believe that he will. I don't believe that this thing will ever be put to bed because it's too deep. It's too far-rooted. It's definitely in the environment. And too many people are should we say, going to be compromised in this system. It's deep faceted. So let's keep watching. Let's keep seeing what it is. The lines are being blurred every day, and the moral boundaries have gone. There are no moral boundaries. There is no discretion here. It was never random. It was moving into a broader architecture of control, and that's what this thing is about. Who was controlling who was pulling the puppet strings for who? And that's where we stand. Listen, I appreciate you guys liking, sharing, and continuously putting the dialogue out there about what we discussed tonight. The conspiracy and the truth about Epstein is basically this was an espionage operation. The allegations are deep. The dots are being connected as we speak, but will it ever come out? I believe not. I believe not. Was there a financial advantage for the people, Epstein and others? Yes, there was. And that's the other part about it. There was power, brokerage, and financial advantage and proximity to the power elites, but without the scrutiny that normally it comes with it. So, there is no liability when you have the goods on someone. Listen, I appreciate y'all for being a part of the show. I appreciate y'all being sharing the information. If you're just joining me, just go ahead and go to the YouTube Amir Shakur Speaks broadcast channel and like it. And let's keep sharing. Let's keep sharing the information. Let's keep breaking it down. And remember, your voice matters. I appreciate y'all. Thank y'all again for joining. And what did you say? It was a trickle down from our country, but it spilled out everywhere. Yes, it spilled out internationally. Thanks again for joining. Share the information, and y'all know how we do. So we appreciate y'all. Peace, y'all.